All right, we are at Panels Comic Book and Coffee Shop here in Oceanside, California, for a little artist meet and greet. We got a bunch of artists here, including
Chad Cavanaugh of Grunt 1B Comics.
Thanks for being on the Hall 8 show, Chad.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I guess, why don't you tell us about your origin story a little bit? How did you find your way to comic books, and what were you into when you were a kid?
I was into Star Wars when I was a kid. I loved Star Wars. I still do to this day. However, most of my comic book consumption was more Mad and Cracked magazine. I loved the satire. It was a lot of fun.
A lot of Sergio Aragonés.
Oh, it's fantastic, yeah. And then, where do we go? Oh, so I grew up in a very small town. I was the youngest of four. I was left out a lot, so my imagination took over, and I started drawing all the time. I started creating my own little worlds, and it was a lot of fun. By the time I was in high school, I'd made my own little comic book. It was more of like comic strip type comic book. But I've always loved to draw. I've always loved to write. But it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I started doing my own comic books. I call myself Grunt 1B Comics because I am a veteran of the United States Army Infantry.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. But we were grunts, and so I used that name. And then I've got currently 4 different series that I've been doing. There's my first series I ever put out was called The Map, and it's a post-apocalypse set in the northern New Mexico desert, post-global nuclear war. There are no zombies. The monsters in my book are the human survivors. I just recently put out the 10th and final issue of the series.
Oh, is that right?
And
It's real pretty.
I'll be getting the second volume of it out. So volume 1 contains issues 1 through 5. Volume 2 will be 6 through 10 to round out the series. I also just completed another series, the Viking era series called Rad God. And this is the complete book here. Just put it out yesterday. Rad God was a book that I came up with a couple years ago. A guy who was my Army roommate. We were both sentinels at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and Arlington National Cemetery together. He passed away on the 1st of September in 2015. And he was just a giant Viking of a man. So I wanted to create something to kind of honor him and in tribute. And originally it was just a design I wanted to make that all of a lot of our other Army brothers wanted to do as a tattoo. And when I created it, I was like, oh, I should create a book out of this. So I decided to make a 4-part series, and I did, and I just completed that, and that's Rad God. And then I have a crime noir series, kind of a John Wick meets Sin City meets The Punisher, called Bedlam in Troubletown. And I also have my new series this year is a supernatural western. It's kind of a Deadpool meets The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and it's called Dead or Alive.
Can't wait to check those out.
Thank you.
Well, let's kind of go back to Rad God, because before interviewing today, you had mentioned one of the characters that you developed there is based off of somebody. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Absolutely. I was at Phoenix Comic-Con in 2016, and I met a man and his son, and his son's name is Thor. They legally changed his name to Thor. Thor is a fantastic person, and I did a sketch cover of him as Thor on a Thor sketch cover, and after the convention ended, I became friends with him and his father, and I speak to him on the phone about once a month. And one day his dad's talking to me, and he's like, yeah, Thor really wants to be a comic book hero. And I said, I think I have something. I have a way to integrate him into the Rad God series. And so that's how we created the character Half Thor, somewhat inspired by my friend Thor. And it was great to introduce a character into the comic book universe who is a member of the Down syndrome community. So he's half Thor, and this is him here, if you can see this. This mighty little warrior right there with the huge hammer. That is the character Half Thor. And he shows up in he shows up in issue 2 and continues on through the end of the story.
I think somebody else may have said it, but...
What you said you were a musician prior to our interview. Can you sort of elaborate on the transition between a musician to becoming a comic book creator? And why did you do it in the first place?
Why was I a musician in the first place?
Why did you make the transition from becoming a musician to a comic book creator?
I had a lot of fun doing music. I was a singer-songwriter. I still have 2 albums on iTunes under the name Chad Cavanaugh. But with music, for a while you're very popular and people like you, and then at some point people just stop liking you, and you have to kind of take an objective look at what you're doing. And being a married man with 3 daughters at home who were all very young at the time, I was going out, 3 to 5 nights a week to still try to pursue music, and it just wasn't really happening anymore. And I was leaving my wife alone with these girls, and it wasn't good for our relationship or for our family, because the family should be together, especially at night. And so I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do music anymore. It was fun, I enjoyed it, but my family's more important to me. And so I stopped doing music and started making comic books. And making comic books, I don't go anywhere to do it. I stay at home. Pardon me. And so that was my transition. I put out my first book. It was The Map #1, came out in April of 2014. And since then, I've put out 23 self-published books.
That's incredible. I have aspirations to create my own comic book sometime in the near future. So that's pretty good. I'm inspired by your story.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, the reason I'm able to make comic books today is because my wife goes to work every day. And so I'm fortunate that she's a good provider, so it allows me the opportunity to be at home, take care of the kids, handle all the stuff at the house, and make comic books. Instead of sitting around watching DVDs all day, I decided, hey, I'm going to make something as well. I'm going to build my own comic book universe, and I'm fortunate that I have the ability to do that.
It seems like people who are creative, whether it be music or art, it seems like they have the potential to be creative in other ways as well. So, like, I'm a graphic designer by trade, but I'm finding that I'm getting better at writing. So, interesting enough.
Well, that'll be a good mix. If the more you like what you're writing, you can do the design for it too. So that allows you to keep everything in-house. I had a lot of fun being a singer-songwriter. I viewed songs as miniature movies. Like, how do you capture somebody within 3 to 4 minutes, and keep them and give them just a story that just they can really wrap themselves around. And with comic books, I like having a story arc over a period of issues, but I also like trying the challenge of writing a single issue that within that issue you kind of have something that's presented and somewhat of a resolution towards the end, but not enough. There's still a cliffhanger, and carry that on to the next one. That's kind of a fun challenge as well. So I don't know, maybe the two correlate, but I agree, and I enjoy it. I also started writing a novel. It's not a graphic novel at all. Like I said before, I've got 3 daughters. I love having good female characters, strong female characters in my books. And so the novel that I started writing is kind of a Harry Potter meets 007 meets Indiana Jones, but the lead character is a 15-year-old girl. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm pretty deep into it, but I'm really enjoying writing that as well. It's kind of a nice departure from comics. With comic books, every panel is valuable real estate, so there's only so many words you can put on there. You really have to show everything with your artwork. And with writing a novel, man, you can just use all the words you want and really get descriptive with everything, and it's a lot of fun.
And how long have you been thinking about that novel? Like the initial ideas, and when do you think it'll come out?
The idea of the novel hit me. My wife and I we had visited Harry Potter World and Universal, and an idea that I shared with her came to me. I'm like, what if this was really what was going on in Harry Potter, kind of thing, like an alternate universe theory of sorts? And that spawned the idea for the book. It's morphed from there, but I just started writing it outright. Everybody has their own process. Mine is I get an idea and I just start making it. And so I'm about 21 chapters into the book so far. As far as the time frame, I really have no time frame for it to be out. I want to get the initial draft done and then add, subtract whatever I need to make it the best possible product.
You mentioned process. For our audience out there who are thinking about making their own comic books, do you think you can maybe briefly tell us about your process when you're creating a comic book?
Yeah, sure. Like I tell people all the time, and I've spoken at universities and high schools and with different groups, if you want to make a comic book, go make a comic book. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for someone to sit around and be like, okay, now you can do it. Get an idea, and you can go about any way of going about making the comic book is your process is okay. I don't think there's a wrong way to do it. As long as you are drawing something every day, writing it every day, and you end up with something, you end up with a product, the process is fine. And you'll fine-tune it from there. My process in general is the idea comes to me, I write down a synopsis of the entire thing, I figure out how I want it to separate it into issues, and I do that, and then I begin drawing it. And being the fact that I'm self-published, I have the freedom to change whatever I want at any point in time. With the map,
It's things like this.
this book here had a completely different ending from what it has, and the ending that I came up with, that I went with, I came up with 2 weeks before I finished it. Yeah, this is a book I've been working on since 2013, and 2 weeks before I finished it, about a month ago, the idea of how it's going to end came to me, and it was kind of world changing. It was like one of those epiphanies. So I'm sitting there. I remember what we were doing. My wife and I are sitting there, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is how it's going to be." I told her, "I'm like, this is how it's going to end." I didn't tell her how it's going to end. She's like, "Why don't you tell me?" I'm like, "Because you have to read it. I want to see your reaction when you read it." I said, "It's going to be beautiful. It's probably going to make you cry." It made me cry when I finished it. I sat there and I stared at it. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I created this. This is so cool." And so now when people have been reading it, I say, please, I want to know your reaction. And I've had people that have messaged me and be like, "I can't believe you're going to try to make me cry when I'm at work." And I'm like, yes, that was the whole point. So I love the story. It was, and the way it ended, I'm very proud of. Oh, I just got a cramp in my leg. Oh, that's much better. Sorry, got a Charlie horse. Yeah, I had surgery on my spine almost a year ago. I was in a wheelchair a year ago at this time. I was suffering from crippling nerve pain, and I went for a period of about 2 months where I didn't sleep, but I was eventually able to get spine surgery, and I was able to walk that night. Recovery's been fun, although it makes it very hard for me to sit for any long period of time. So making comics becomes a fun challenge because you got to sit at the drawing board for a long time. So what I've done is I'll draw for 2-3 hours at a time, and then get up and have to walk around or do whatever.
I really absorb it.
But yeah, every once in a while something like that happens. I get a nice little Charlie horse in the leg.
Now I'm just like,
I wonder if you know how people are using those stand-up desks. I wonder how that would be for artists.
No, I couldn't imagine. I wouldn't want to do a stand-up desk. I have a nice little cushion for my seat. They make these great cushions where there's no pressure on the spine. It's not a hemorrhoid donut. That wasn't my issue. But it looks kind of like it's just one with little cutout where you would normally sit, because it takes away all the compression on your spine. But yeah, during that time I got 3 books done.
does that come up a lot?
Yeah, because I knew I had hope. I said, one day I think I'm going to be better, and I think that when I am better, I want to look back and be able to tell a story even though I was in pain in a wheelchair, I still finished 3 books.
It kind of reminds me of remember that movie about Bruce Lee when he got hurt, and then he wrote his book.
No, is that where he talks about becoming water? Water.
Well, no, that was that video that they showed, that black and white video when he was being interviewed. But in that Bruce Lee movie back in the day, with I think Jason Scott Lee, they showed a part in there where he got hurt and he was kind of immobile.
Okay.
And that's when he started writing, I guess, his Tao Jeet Kune Do.
Oh.
That kind of reminds me of what you're talking about.
I'll take that as a compliment.
So, I asked Keithan this earlier, and you sort of touched on it, but seeing as how you're a independent self-publisher, would you ever want to go work for one of the big twos or Image or any other publishers? Do you want to stay as a self-publisher?
No, there's pros and cons for everything. I would stay away from DC and Marvel. Not that there's anything wrong with them; they're fantastic. But I like to own my intellectual property. That's just me personally. I've created this. I'm going to enjoy all the benefits from it. Being picked up by an Image Comics or one of the other publishers that handle creator-owned would be fantastic. It would be really awesome to be able to be picked up, to have that ability to print large numbers, to get into Diamond, to get it distributed worldwide that way. I handle I handle every single order for my books. I do everything online, and I get orders from around the world. And I enjoy doing that. I enjoy being able to sign the books to the individuals that are buying them from me, and I appreciate their support. But it would be really cool to not have to worry about, getting more of these printed or getting more of those printed, or how are they going to get distributed. It'd be cool to have, and that'd be a huge benefit. It would just reach a broader audience faster. But I don't know. I like doing the work. I do pretty good multitasking. So.
It seems like, we talked about it earlier today, but, the publishers can take care of the marketing, you can take care of the creating, but it seems like you, being, at least in your case, it seems like you have a good rapport with your fans and your audience, and you've built it up through social media.
Oh, they're fantastic. I call them the Blamily. So in the first issue of the map was a panel that was just a big blam on there. Looks like this.
Working on pages. So one day I'll show the pencils.
There it is, right there.
I'll post up the pencils. And then
Blam. Anyway, made T-shirts, stickers, and so they would start to post pictures of themselves in the T-shirts or with the books and hashtagging themselves the Blamily. And it's cool because that's 4 continents now, and it's all through social media. It's never been with the help of any professional marketing company at all. And I love them. I know that every time I put out a book, they're going to get online and order it, and they're going to talk about it. And I enjoy interacting with them. It's a lot of fun for me. That's why it's fun for me to be able to get out of where I do all my work and get out to places like Panels Coffee and Comic Bar here in Oceanside, or when I go to SoCal Comics down in San Diego, which will be there again on November 11th for a huge event, or doing the conventions like Comic Fest, or going out to Las Cruces or El Paso or Phoenix. And it's fun to meet new people. It's fun to see existing people that I've been communicating with online. And I love to talk, man. I will talk forever and ever. Being a performer in music was good. Before that, I had training as a performer, being a sentinel at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington National Cemetery. And it's not about being a performer, but it's the fact that you are doing something in front of a massive crowd day in and day out that you have to do perfectly. And so you learn how to get up in front of people. You learn how to present yourself in front of people, how to speak, how to not shy away from things, and kind of how to meet people too. I think one of the reasons why I do successful at events is because I'm able to talk to people. I've been at shows where the people sitting next to me spend their entire time looking down at their smartphones or their iPads, complaining about the show, when I'm sitting there talking to people that are walking by and selling my books to them.
I think you were telling me about how, I guess, you were at a convention one time and you made eye contact with somebody.
Oh, yeah. They were across the way at an artist alley, and nobody was even acknowledging them. And I was standing up, looking at them, waiting for them. When they looked over at me, I waved and said hi. They made a beeline over to my table and bought every one of my books, specifically because I said hi to them. He's like, yeah, you said hi to us. I'm like, cool. Sometimes it's all it takes. Sometimes there's a little more work involved, but it's fun. I get to talk about the stories I've created, get to bring people into the Grunt 1B Comics universe, so it's a lot of fun.
Speaking of that universe, where can people find that universe?
I do a lot on Instagram and Facebook, Grunt1B Comics. Also, you can find my books at grunt1bcomics.etsy.com, or at any of the local shows that I attend.
Well, thank you for your time, Chad.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it, man.
We look forward to talking with you again.
Awesome. Me too.
All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Later.